So thank you and welcome for, I'm going to call it a conversation. It's not a workshop, it's a conversation around creativity. And this conversation is, well, we decided to have this conversation with Iwona because we connected on LinkedIn. And after 10 minutes of a quick introduction call, we just said, we have so much to talk about creativity. Why don't we make it a little bit more public and we share our experience through rediscovering creativity, but also what creativity means, how we can express it more, because we need more creative people. I mean, we are all creative. The fact that we are taught out of creativity is quite insane, but there is a lot that we want to cover around imperfection, around visibility, around fear. So we're going to just dive in now. And first of all, I'd love, Iwona, if you could introduce yourself in a few words, and then we'll start the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marie. It's such a great privilege to continue our conversation. My name is Iwona. I'm based in Switzerland these days. I'm the founder of Ministry of Creativity. And as you can see also with this word creativity in the name of my company, I'm just a huge fan of creativity in general. All of the aspects of this, not just a cognitive creativity or not just manual creativity, but creativity as a human being, because I truly, truly believe that we all are intrinsically extremely creative. And unfortunately, what happens very often, we are just scored out of our creativity. And it took me a while to come back and to rediscover my own creativity. And that's a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. And I experiment and do lots of actually creative experimentations all around, my business and my personal life, kind of to unleash even more of that.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And we're going to talk about how you rediscover your creativity, because I think that is something that people can resonate a lot with. Is, as a child, we are all creative. We are creative nature, as you said. But then suddenly we are taught out of creativity because we're not good enough. And we're going to touch on this subject. But first, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Marie de Champchesnel. I'm a career change coach. But before becoming a coach, I worked in the arts industry for 20 years. And although I'm a career coach, what I love doing is helping people being more creative, bring more of their creativity into their career. And that means not just on an artistic level, but it can also be by being more innovative, by trusting their intuition as well. Because I think that creativity starts with that, is trusting that we know, and then that we can express ourselves. I mean, to me, creativity, I always define creativity as the courage to be ourselves. And we will discuss about that later. But I think that in today's world, it's very, very hard to be ourselves, or to know how to be ourselves, because we keep on comparing each other. But now I'd love to hear from you, Iwona, about what creativity means to you and what has been your journey through creativity, but in particular in being creative. And you tell us how you are the most creative and how you rediscover that creativity once you were taught out of it in a quite brutal way, I would say.
That's true. Thank you for asking this question, such an important one in general. I will go back in time and introduce you to my 13 years old self. At the high school, I was told that, I'm just too young to write things I have written. So you can imagine that in a way, we had an assignment to write an essay about love. And I really spent the whole weekend just writing the essay about love. I was just so excited about this. And then a few days later, the teacher came to the classroom, and basically he came to me and put my essay on the top of my desk and said, like, you failed. It's impossible that you wrote this. And I was so shocked at that moment, because of course I poured my heart and soul into this text. And I just took the papers and just left the classroom. I was just completely in shock. I didn't know what happened. And
How old
as a teenager,
how old were you when that happened?
right now, wait a second. I think I was 15 or 16 around this time. So I was a teenager.
Yeah, so at
And
this age, we write essay and we know how to write. I mean, it's not like you're 6 years old or even 8 and you're just, writing in a more clumsy way. You're 15, 16, so you've got a good idea of how to write if writing is one of your talent.
that's true. And that's what I was thinking. That's how I was thinking about this as well before that moment. But clearly, the sentence was, you didn't write this, it's impossible, you're too young for that, the essay is too wise, and so on and so forth. So it was kind of lots of excuses why it's impossible for me as a 15 or 16 years old to write this text. Thankfully, we had then later a conversation and there were people involved and stuff, and yes, my creativity was kind of received the justice for that. But inside of me, I just, I called the situation kind of the kidnapped creativity. My creativity was kidnapped, and that moment, it took me over 20 years to come back to that, or around 20 years to come back to that. And for many years, I didn't even write the word, from my kind of intrinsic creativity. I didn't sit down as before to just write down my ideas or to write down a poem or a text. I was just completely blocked. And it took me a while to come back to that. But then when I did, and I did that in the midst of a personal and professional crisis, I just experienced the words just kind of flowing from me. I started to write short essays and short blog posts about different topics, most related to creativity, entrepreneurship, and communications. And step by step, I just rediscovered that. And these days, creativity and writing and creating other things as well. So in business, that's kind of my default. The ideas are just flowing. But what I had to do, and I feel like this even these days, I just had to unlock the straw man that I was presented with, unlock this kidnap creativity and invite it back to my life to really unleash it again.
And I mean, thank you for sharing that experience. And but what I'm wondering is, it took you 20 years. So for 20 years, you didn't write.
I
And
mean, I
writing,
wrote
you
just,
wrote, but nothing that was, as you say, probably coming from your heart, coming from yourself. It was an expression of yourself. It was, maybe you were writing, but it wasn't as an expression of yourself. And how did you reconnect? How did you rediscover? I mean, you say step by step, but often what I found is, especially with some of my clients or myself, is that first step is looks like a mountain to us. It's massive, and we just need to break it down to small steps. But what was it that how did you break that fear, or if there was a fear, or how did you break that thought?
it's a brilliant question. Thank you for asking so specifically. I was presented with the great opportunity of being sick. I know it sounds a little bit weird right now, but I got sick with long COVID, which at that time I didn't know how long it's going to last. And the only thing I actually could do, I just had this kind of storms of ideas. So what I did, I just wrote them down. And I did that for a day and then for weeks. And, I had most of the time I was just sleeping and doing absolutely nothing, sleeping, going for short walks, coming back, sleeping, eating. And because I was really physically and mentally, I was just sick. I couldn't do many things. But I didn't have any fear because I feel at the time my brain just didn't work properly. So I didn't fear anything in a way. I was just like, oh, I really would like to write something down. So I wrote it down. There were no expectations, no future plans, no visions for that. It was just the simple moment of, okay, I feel like writing right now. And I just started writing. And, and at some point I was like, oh, I feel like it would be great that I would just start publishing this. So I started publishing these things, I started publishing also more personal stories, which was like such a new thing to me in general. And that's how I discovered that. And I also, what it helped me to do, and I think what the illness helped me to do, was to completely detach from the external expectations. Because what I was thinking, or how I reflect on that even these days, is just like, if you're in a way so sick physically and you just cannot do things, like nothing matters. What matters is really just your health and how you maintain yourself and how you try to get out of the illness itself. And creativity at that time, writing, helped me a lot, kind of bringing these ideas to the paper, bringing them to the online world, trying to play around also with other different creative tools that really help me to create the habit around creativity, and also to rediscover that I'm actually extremely creative. These days I have just ideas flowing from me all the time. But it took me a personal and professional crisis to kind of come back to that. It's kind of a blessing in disguise, you would say.
Yeah, and I guess it's and it was a little bit what we were talking with Anita at the start of this conversation, is that healing process of using creativity to heal yourself. And it's almost like you use what's your inner talent, what is your, what we call zone of genius, to go back to life, to go back to healing as well. But what I love is that you also in that moment were able to let go of maybe that sense of it has to be perfect before I can publish anything. And I'd love to touch on this idea that when we create something, whether it's on an artistic level, whether we're bringing ideas, and if we quite innovative, we want to bring in ideas, and we're like, no, this idea is probably stupid. It's not good enough. I'm not going to put it. So whether it's artistic, whether it's innovation, whether we're bringing a solution, when we are being creative, there's a sense of doing it in a perfect way. And until it's perfect, we can't show it. What's your experience of that, around that, and how did you yes, what's your experience around perfection?
I feel like, of course, we observe that perfectionism is I think that's probably one of the biggest illnesses of our generation, that everything needs to be perfect. Also because we are surrounded by so many resources, we are not living any longer in the poor societies, and therefore the quality of our work, the quality of everything we are bringing to the world needs to be perfect in a way. That's, I feel like, a societal construct that we are living within. Nevertheless, what I discovered for myself is, like, if I put on my shoulders the pressure of being perfect, nothing is going to happen. I just can physically not do things. It's just impossible for me to sit down and just to write something, because I'm just blocked by this idea that he needs to be perfect. And that's the reason why I started to run the so-called creative experiments. And the word experiment has something so beautiful within itself, because it basically takes out all of the external pressures from your shoulders, and it allows you just to be, and just to be in the moment, just to create. And it doesn't matter if that's writing, or if that's painting, or that whatever you are doing, if that's talking, creating podcasts on films, whatever. And I feel that's how I kind of unlearned to think about everything needs to be perfect. And I can tell you right now, when I think about the work that I put into the world over the last years, 100% of the things are just imperfect. 100%. Like, there's no one thing that I would say, like, I'm just so proud of this because it's perfect. Rather, I would say I'm proud of this because I dared to put my heart and soul into something I believed in, and I dared to put it outside to the world, and just to show it to the people. And that's everything. That's what matters. What I feel what happens very often is that many artists or creative people themselves, it doesn't have to be the kind of artistic creativity. It can be also creativity in science or creativity in business. People are just simply blocked by the idea that this invention or this creation is not going to be accepted by the society. And for me, actually, it's just how I think about this. It really doesn't matter how it's going to be accepted by the society. What matters is that we continue doing our stuff. We continue putting our intrinsic creativity outside to the world, because that was what really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that when you say that, what the words that comes to me is from Marianne Williamson about, we need to be in our light. We need to just be ourselves. Um, and it's true that in today's world, I think that we were talking about it before when we're talking about the ancient Greek, and that needs to, it wasn't perfection, but they had to follow certain rules about beauty. And today that aesthetic has been replaced by perfection, but to a standard that I'm not sure what even is the standard, except that is comparing ourselves to one another. So we might say, oh, well, my work is different from this work, but that is the beauty. because our work is different. That's what makes us unique. And you were talking about, putting yourself out there, but that is also can be quite a block as well, because that can feel quite, we're feeling quite vulnerable as well. We sort of, it's almost like we're opening our heart to the world, or that's how it feels at first. So what would you say? I mean, I have experienced it myself. For example, I have been holding myself back to just write and put words on social media for a long time. But then the more I've done it, the more I've enjoyed doing it, because the more I've done it, the more I've practiced, the more I'm actually now finding my voice and the way I want to do it. But I remember that first time when I pressed the button and I just wanted to go and hide under the table because I thought that the world was falling apart. But nothing happened. I'm still here.
Yeah.
And what did you do? I mean, how did you said you first published it, you let it go because it was a healing process and you had learned to let it go. And I love that idea of experimentation, because it removes that pressure. But what would you say to someone who are still feeling that pressure, who are still comparing themselves to the thousands of artists around us, or graphic designer or innovator or creator, and comparing themselves? What would you say? What's the first step that they could do? I mean, maybe it's about reframing and using a different words, but what would be your advice?
What you mentioned right now, it's so important, and I see that also in my environment. Too many people are focusing on following others people's work and comparing themselves. So I feel like any work that has been done so far is very important, and can always get inspired by others people's perspectives and work and any creation in general. But what we should spend more time on is really creating. That's it. Like, if you follow other people's work, then you don't create. If you think about creating, you don't create. If you talk about creating, you don't create. If you create, you create. That's it. So I feel like my suggestion always is just do it. Forget about anything else. The world doesn't exist in a way that we believe. The world is much more complex and holistic in general than we can imagine, also as a creative people. What I suggest is just do it and put it out there and experiment, and that's it. And then when you're finished, go and do yet another experiment and yet another experiment. For me, what I observe in general in social media, people who have that's a generalization, but let me do it. People who have very often who have nothing to say are mostly on social media, and they say a lot. And it's just like, when people who are just sometimes arrogant or just very self-confident, they just put whatever they want out there, and it's just online, and they don't care about other people's opinion. Therefore, I think our work is much more important to find the balance in a way, but because our voices as creators very often are just not heard, not visible at all, because we don't allow ourselves to be visible. And that's what we should find within us, the strength to be visible, to allow ourselves to be visible.
And I think that where you touch on, there's two things here that I'd like to say. Is one, when you talk about experiment, what comes to mind is mastery. Creating is about learning. It's about a progression. It's about an experiment. It's about trying. It's about a journey. It's not about having it all figured out and straight away do it, because then there's nothing after that. And that's stopped. So there's also that notion of creativity, and creation is about mastery and about getting better at it, and about almost like the sculpture, chipping through the marble and trying to discover what's behind it. And then the other things that you touch on, and I love, is to do things. We don't put things out there because we care too much. We care about hurting someone, or we care about what other people are going to think. So when we care, it's almost that if we're scared to do things from a place of love. And I'd love to hear what's your experiment, what's your idea, it's how can you do things more from a place of love rather than from a place of fear of rejection or fear of hurting or fear of whatever fear is. How can we shift that?
The more you create, the more you are just, letting go of everything that is inessential in your life. And that's what I experienced. What you mentioned about mastery is so true and so important. Yeah, that's true. We are becoming in a way masters of our crafts. What I observe also for myself, I'm actually mastering myself and my inner world, and that became much more important than the craft itself. Because through the journey, you just learn so much about yourself, about your needs, about your values, about so many different things. And when you have all of them kind of in place, in a way, of course, it's always work in progress. But when you have them in place, things that are kind of not connect to them, they just fall apart automatically. So maybe the idea would be to focus first on our inner work, or maybe just do it, in the same at the same time, where we know what is, when you know what is your values, you don't care about what other people really think about you. When you know that you have this intrinsic strength and creativity, and you have so much value you can give to the world, nothing really matters. What matters is your inner work and the work that you want to put to the world. So maybe we need to, in a way, heal all of these tiny traumas that we have within ourselves, and then show up in the world as our authentic selves, without being bothered or without being blocked by external expectations, whatever the expectations could be, or whatever the fears or limiting beliefs can be.
And I love that because it's really about, at the end, what you're saying is like creativity is about going back to ourselves.
That's true. And I say that creativity is everything. When we look at at our whole lives, all the time we create, we make things up. Of course, in our work, we talk about expertise in the field, but how do you even measure that? Most of the experts, they became expert because they made things up on the way. And I feel like we need to have this understanding, or we need to allow ourselves to think about this also as a process of creating ourselves, creating our work, and kind of learning on the way and experimenting, and just letting everything that doesn't belong to us just go.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that, the fact that you just need to let go of what's not us, and then go back to your value, go back to who you are. And that's how, of course, then by being vulnerable, then that's when you embrace that that creative process, because you
Absolutely.
accept yourself.
Exactly. And right now, I'm curious also, Marie, to learn about you. Could you share with us your process, your stories? How did you rediscover your creativity?
So I think for me, my creative was more, I love sculpture, and I only did sculpture in my late teenage years. But I remember when I was doing an art class, and I was about 15, so same period as
The
you,
same, the same idea.
same experience, same I guess, yeah, age. And I came back from my art class and I show a painting to my dad, and I was just learning about technique. I was neither good nor bad. I was just learning. I just love those art classes where I was completely immersed in the creative process, and I love those weekly meetings. And my dad, for whatever reason, just said to me, he said, a child could have painted that, but in a very negative way. And I'm thinking about it now. I have a child, and I'm like, well, I would love her to paint anything. It's but that, for me, that told me you're not good. And then when I then did sculpting, and I started learning about sculpting, and I remember I did a self-portrait of my grandfather, and I gave it to him. So that was a kind of a big sculpture that I made. And he was like, oh, you're an artist. I didn't believe him. And when I decided I wanted to study fine art, but there was that fear in me that probably I would not be good enough, and I would be so hurt that I couldn't do it. So I studied history of art because I still was still attracted to art. But then I kind of like disconnected with myself. And I think the rediscovery journey for me has been quite of a long journey, because it's been a journey back to myself. And it's only recently, although I don't do anything artistically at the moment, I love being a solopreneur. Is I love creating, I love having new ideas, and I love putting them in or just sharing my work, sharing my ideas. And that's how I express my creativity now. It's about creating the work I do. So it's got nothing to do in terms of an artistic way, but it is very present in the sense of showing up as who I am. And for me, it's been a journey of going back to myself, and especially trying to ask my questions like, how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be? And I think that's, as you said, it's only by doing that I've been learning. That first step was really hard because it felt very, very vulnerable to be visible. But I coach, not only, but I coach women a lot around bringing more creativity into their career and at least more impact. And what I do is bringing more of themselves. And I thought I have to be visible. If I'm going to be coaching people on being visible, I need to be visible. But it was only by doing, and it was only by taking that first step. And I think, as you said, it was also by reframing it, saying it's a progression, it's a journey. It's like removing those, almost those weight, removing those expectations that we have on ourselves, that we just put on ourselves. We expect to be something that we're not, rather than accepting who we are. And I think there's a big work to do here, rather than and putting some expectation there. We need to just accept what we are and who we are, and that comes through learning and doing. So that's been my journey back to creativity. Is just for a long time, after I worked in the creative industry, I didn't even want to go to a museum anymore. I just, for me, there was that block. And, but now I love it. I love talking about it. I, I just don't understand why creativity is not part of the curriculum at school, and why we don't put the light more on creativity. Because, as we said at the beginning, we are creative people. Even when we do math, we are creative. I mean, so that's why I want to really, and I wanted to have that conversation today, and I keep having those conversations around creativity, because I want people to realize that they are creative, but they need to find their own way.
Absolutely, because we are individually so different and unique, and the creativity that we are bringing to the world in different aspects of our lives is just special and unique. That's why what we discussed before, all of the competitions or measurements around creativity actually shouldn't exist, because how can you even judge somebody's creativity based on rich criteria? Everyone is unique, and we have enough examples in the world to see that sometimes creative people are just not acknowledged at all just after they're dead. Van Gogh is the best example. Nikola Tesla is the best example on the or on the on the side of invention. I'm just curious to learn from you, if you would have a chance to talk to your younger self. Let's imagine Marie, 15 years old. What would you tell her after she heard from her dad that even a kid could did that?
I mean, it's interesting that you said that, because I recently had a what is it called, a tapping session on that, because someone was doing a training, and that's what came for me. I I would just say it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just enjoying it, and it's about enjoying it. It's about enjoyment. It's about bringing joy. It's about, so whether it's good or bad, I wasn't planning to become an artist. That wasn't even in my mind. I was just enjoying something, and I think that it's really important. It's like, I talk to so many people who've lost their joy because they've lost themselves. They're disconnected to themselves. So if you want to create, if you want, whether it's on an artistic level or not, just enjoy the process and enjoy the journey. And I think that's what I would say, and that's what I'm trying every day to do, is enjoy it. It doesn't mean that the fear is not there still, because we are a human being, and we creature who don't want to take risks. So there's always a fear of a risk about to happen. But it's about bringing more joy, and about really saying, okay, well, if you're doing it and it's not bringing you joy, don't do it. It's not, that's mean it's not the right thing for you to do. And then go and explore something else. So it's about exploring, it's about joy and learning.
And very often, as we mentioned before, listen to your heart and listen to your intuition, kind of tapping into your inner world in a way. You mentioned something very interesting before. You said that, you know, you understand why creativity is not taught in our schooling system. Let's imagine an ideal scenario. Let's imagine the world where creativity is in the schools. How would you imagine that?
Well, first of all, I think that we need to go back to understand what creative is. And it's just not about the artistic. Artistic creativity is one side of creativity, but it's not the only side of creativity. So it's showing that in everything that we do, we are being creative. When we're learning math, we are being creative. When we're writing, we are being creative. When we are brainstorming idea together at school because there is a project, we are being creative. It's really about showing to people that in everything they do, they are being creative. And artistic way, whether they have an artistic talent or not. And even if they don't have the artistic talent, they can learn it, they can master it, they can keep on going and practicing. But it's showing that side of, you're doing math. Why are you doing math? Because that's bringing innovation, that's bringing ideas, you're being creative. So it's putting the light on what is creativity, basically.
Wonderful.
That's what I would say. But I think to close our conversation, what I'd love, I mean, when we were preparing this conversation, you ask a question about talking about an artist or a creator that embody imperfection, or the idea of imperfection. And I've been thinking about it, but I'd love to hear first from you, and then I'll share from me, and then we'll open to some questions and any comments that you've had during the conversation. But is there anyone that you have in mind, either an artist or a creator, that for you embodies the idea of imperfection?
Yes, actually, one of my favorite writers is Elizabeth Gilbert, and she writes a lot about creativity, but also her novels are just wonderful, like pure creativity in play. And she said in one of her interviews, and I believe she also wrote about this in her book, Big Magic, Creativity Beyond Fear. She said that, you know, if you could give her any of her books and she could tell you exactly which places are not correct, where are the characters a little bit too tweaked, you know, where are the things that really don't match the narrative. And she knows that, but she also knows that at some point she just needs to give it to the publisher, and that's it. That's the end of the story. Because otherwise she will try to make it perfect, which of course in her endeavors, in her work, it just doesn't exist. And I love that. I love how she embodies imperfection and creativity so beautifully, and she's extremely authentic and vulnerable about the whole process. Of course, also very disciplined, because that's what she talks about a lot, that, you know, she has the time when she just sits down and does, you know, like in the morning, in the afternoon, she just works a lot. Of course, that's part of her journey. But she also knows that at some point there's a time to give it away.
And I think it's that's that letting go,
Exactly.
and accepting that it's good enough. It's 80%
Mm-hmm.
perfect and 20% good enough. And I think that for me, when I was preparing and thinking about this question, there's two things that came up. One is kintsugi, is the Japanese art of perfect imperfection, is when they are repairing a piece of ceramic using gold. and that becomes that giving a second life to this ceramic, and creating an imperfect. So rather than discarding that ceramic that's broken, they've been putting it back together and using gold, which is a precious metal, giving it a second life, and is a more even beautiful life. And now it's becoming a nut. And that, for me, that kind of embody that perfect imperfection. But there's also the artist Giacometti, who used to work on his drawing and his drawing and his drawing to capture the essence of a person until almost that person disappeared. And that's what we were talking about. And for me, it embodies that notion of the more we're trying to be perfect, the more we're losing ourselves. And when we are embracing that perfection, that's when we are reconnecting with ourselves.
Amen.